In Mexico, President Manuel Lopez Obrador signed a decree nationalizing lithium. In Turkiye, authorities report the end of rescue efforts in all provinces except the two hardest hit by last week's massive earthquake. And in Ethiopia, African heads of states and government continue to address a slew of challenges facing the continent during the second day of the 36th African Union Summit. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Saturday, Mexican President Manuel Lopez Obrador signed a decree nationalizing lithium, a strategic mineral for the development of new technologies. This measure is complementary to a reform approved in April 2022 that considers lithium as the nation's property. According to the Energy Secretariat, lithium has been detected in only 23 countries, and it is estimated that Mexico is in 10th place in terms of reserves. The Mexican government has invited lithium-producing countries and companies to participate in the Sonora plan, among them the electric car manufacturer Tesla, which is expected to install a plant in Mexico. The Ministry of Health of Peru will declare a health emergency due to the outbreak of dengue fever in 13 regions and 59 districts of the country. According to the authorities, the measure is based on an action plan presented by the Directorate for Prevention and Control of Metaxenic Diseases and Zoonosis, and with contributions from the Technical Committee on Dengue of the Ministry of Health, which seeks to intervene in the affected regions and districts. Among the main immediate actions to be implemented are the strengthening of primary healthcare services and hospitals, epidemiological surveillance and prevention and health promotion activities, with the participation of the community, authorities, and strategic allies. According to figures from the National Epidemiology Center, so far this year, 11,585 cases and 16 deaths from dengue have been reported in the country. In Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso failed to attend the second parliament summons about Caso Encuentro, the parliamentary commission investigating the alleged corruption network in public companies and links with drug trafficking groups, summoned the president after he had failed attending the previous appearance. Since he is recovering from surgery, the president was supposed to do this via video conference. The parliamentary commission was to deliver the report with its conclusions on February 22nd. Due to the delay, however, legislators agreed to request an extension, given new evidence of illicit campaign funding between the government and drug trafficking cartels. Should the extension be approved, the report will be delivered on Saturday, March 4th. The famous carnivals returned to Brazil's largest city, Sao Paulo, attracting crowds of domestic and foreign tourists. This is the first time that the event has returned to its traditional date since the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020. It was last held in April 2022. This year's float designs highlight cultural diversity with elements of African folklore, classics of European culture, and local and Brazilian culture. And some of Brazil's best Samba schools perform in Friday night's parade. The federal government expects some 46 million people to participate in the annual celebration and for the festivities to raise some $1.58 billion, up to 26.9% from last year, according to an estimate by Brazil's National Confederation of Trade in Goods, Services and Service Provisions. On Saturday in the United States, citizens handed in their weapons to Houston State Police specialists under strict security controls. A long line of cars formed in Dawson Park, Harris County, where the owners, most of whom had at least a dozen guns in their possession, had to carry them in the trunk or in the back seat of the car, from where a policeman in charge removed them, verified that they were unloaded, and then registered them on a document. In exchange, they received vouchers of $50 for a useless weapon, $100 for a shotgun, a rifle, $150 for a pistol, and $200 for semi-automatic weapons. During the day, 793 weapons were handed in. This is the third campaign of this type in the county in the last year, where another 2,000 guns have already been collected. In Chile, a reactivation of forest fires is reported in the regions of Biobío and Araucanía in southern part of the country. Chile's Minister of the Interior, Carolina Toja, informed that a total of 256 forest fires have been reported in the country, of which 151 are under control and 67 are still being fought by firefighters and military. According to the high official of Chile's government, the fire has reached warning proportions in several communities and populated areas of the Araucanía region. Meanwhile, in the Biobío region, the fires developed much more severely than expected. According to official reports based on evaluations made by the National Forestry Corporation, around 25% of the fires registered this year have been intentional, something that in the last 2 weeks has left 25 people dead and over 400,000 hectares burned throughout the South American country. Paraguayan authorities reported that over 800 people lost their homes as a result of the heavy rains affecting the country. The National Emergency Department reported that despite the material damage, no human losses have been reported in the areas affected by the floods. The agency explained that rescue and assistance teams are working in coordination with local authorities to deal with the situation. Meanwhile, other groups deployed in trucks loaded with food and humanitarian aid are assisting people affected. The heavy rain started on Thursday, February 16th in the department of Amambay, resulted in the overflowing of large rivers affecting the main roads and buildings in the region. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at TeleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The European Union's High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, called on Sunday to speed up and increase military assistance to Ukraine. In a speech at the 59th Security Conference in Munich, Borrell considered that Ukraine is a member of the European family and urged the need to speed up military aid to this country. In this sense, he condemned that certain countries of the bloc show skepticism towards the support to Kiev and called on these countries to behave in accordance with the universal values they defend. The High Commissioner was also in favor of Ukraine's entry into the European Union. However, he recalled that this will require changes both in the European Union and in Ukraine, which will have to make reforms in order to meet the criteria. China's government warned the United States of the consequences of its insistence on exaggerating and taking advantage of the accidental entry of the scientific balloon into its airspace. During his meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the 59th Munich Security Conference, the Director of Foreign Affairs of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, Wang Yi, called on Washington not to take advantage of the situation to promote an escalation of tensions and warned that if it does not, it will have to bear the consequences of Beijing's response. Wang Yi reaffirmed the position on the accidental nature of the event and criticized the abuse of the U.S. abuse of force, who shot down the Chinese aerostatic plane, saying it was part of an espionage program. In that sense, Wang Yi upheld that Washington has no moral standing to discredit China because U.S. balloons have flown multiple times over China's airspace. Israeli protesters rallied in Tel Aviv for a 7th straight week against controversial legal reforms being pushed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ultra-right-wing government. Tens of thousands turned out for main protests in the capital as demonstrations were also held in cities across the country, including Haifa and Beersheba. According to the plans by Justice Minister Yariv Levin, a majority in parliament should be able to pass a law, even if it violates the basic law in the opinion of the Supreme Court. The far-reaching changes could also play into the Prime Minister's hands in his current corruption trial, where he stands accused of fraud, breach of trust, and corruption. Some experts have already warned of an end to democracy in the country if the plans are implemented. Turkiye and the rescue efforts in all provinces except the two hardest hit by last week's massive quake that killed tens of thousands. The nation's disaster agency head Yunus Sezer said search and rescue efforts continue in about 40 buildings in the provinces of Hatay and Kahramanmaraş. There had been abundant coverage of rescue teams finding survivors, but that has now slowed, with no survivors found in at least 24 hours. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said some 2.2 million people have been evacuated or have left the affected provinces. The total number of dead, including Syria, now stands at 44,377. Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said Saturday that some 105,000 buildings collapsed and had to be demolished or were severely damaged as a result of the quake. In Syria, humanitarian aid continues to arrive in regions controlled by anti-government groups. A convoy of 14 truckloads of 1,269 tents and winter kits sent by MSF arrived on Sunday in Syria through the Al-Hamam border crossing in the Afrin area. The UN announced that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad agreed to open 2 more border crossings from Turkey into northwestern Syria to allow in aid. Anadolu news agency posted videos of toys left behind in rubble after 2 powerful earthquakes in southern Turkey that killed thousands of people.
On Monday, February 6, millions of people were sleeping peacefully in their homes. It was 4:17 a.m. when the first earthquake struck southeastern Turkey and northern Syria. It was magnitude 7.8 on the Richter scale. Only 9 hours after the first earthquake, whose epicenter was very close to the city of Gaziantep, there was an aftershock of magnitude 7.5 of our normal intensity. From that moment on, the nightmare began for many. Desperation, confusion, and cries for help. The images shocked the world. Entire buildings collapsed, taking thousands of souls who were buried under the rubble. Immediately, the expressions of solidarity began. Hundreds of countries offered help by sending rescuers, food, and medical teams. 13 days have passed, and in the destroyed cities there is still chaos and uncertainty about what is to come. There are still people missing, entire families are still under the rubble, and there is still hope of finding some alive.
On Sunday, the Israeli army carried out an attack with missile rounds fired from the direction of the occupied Syrian Golan against some points in the city of Damascus and its surroundings, including residential neighborhoods inhabited by civilians. According to a military source, the Syrian air defenses responded immediately and intercepted most of the projectiles. The source acknowledged that the aggression resulted in the death of 5 people, including a soldier, while 15 civilians were wounded, some of which are now in critical condition. Several houses were also destroyed as a result of the attack, while there were material losses in several neighborhoods of the capital Damascus. We have more news coming up after a fun short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. Heads of states arrived at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa for the second and last day of the organization's 36th summit. More than 30 presidents and prime ministers are in attendance as they discuss a slew of challenges facing the continent. The president of the African Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, questioned the effectiveness of the sanctions imposed on Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali in response to the military coup that took place in these countries. Faki called for speeding up the establishment of a free trade zone in Africa, denouncing the lack of political will of the last 60 years. For his part, the president of the Comoros, Asali Assoumani, called for the total cancellation of African foreign debt to facilitate the economic recovery of the region and to face the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis in Ukraine. On Friday, hundreds of displaced women in Goma called for the departure of the rebel group M23 and the end of violence in eastern Congo. With babies on their back, they chanted slogans and carried signs demanding justice and peace. Casilkitiki Asusta, displaced mother of 4 children, declared M23 war.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas.